News Update 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The only thing more embarrassing than LA Mayor Karen Bass not answering questions when she was peppered with them by a Sky News reporter is when she actually does answer questions about the devastating wildfires ravaging California, ravaging the LA area specifically, as far as she is concerned, now that she's back from her junket to Ghana.
Yeah, conserve water, and if you need help, URL.
So if you receive an evacuation order, please leave immediately. If you receive a warning, get ready. Protect yourself and protect each other. And don't divert firefighters from our strategy. Signals are out and the roads have debris. So stay off the roads unless you are evacuating or have another emergency. Be prepared, food, water, medicine, a bag packed and ready. Again, this is an active situation. And conserve water to the extent that you can. We want to make sure that we are ready if we need more water. But make no mistake, Los Angeles will rebuild stronger than ever. Right now, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL.
I think lacounty.gov/emergency is what she should have said, and she never corrected herself, nor did anybody else.
I think the staff. URL is ursol.org.
That's their leadership there? Whew.
Well, and just to put a human face on the devastation there, I mean, I know it's hard for some people, particularly if they don't agree with him politically, to have much sympathy for James Woods because he's a famous rich guy. But you know what? He's also a 77-year-old dude who has a home that he and his wife just finished and is enjoying his, golden years there. And he just lost everything. And that transcends your income bracket, if you will, your net worth. So, I mean, this is a very human moment that James Woods had on CNN talking about what happened to him and how his family and how they were reacting, and quite a tender moment too.
I was looking and I said, that smoke is white. This smoke is black. It's moving this way. We've got to go that way because white smoke means that they got the fire out, at least, the major part of it, and we'll be out of the way of the congestion. And as soon as we got down the hill, we finally got into the Sunset congestion. It's 9 miles to Beverly Hills. It takes us usually about 25 minutes. Took 2.5 hours. And you have to understand, somebody didn't charge their car, their electric car, didn't put gas in their gasoline car, and now they're on Sunset. Oh, I got to abandon my car, and now the fire trucks can't get through, and now people can't walk. When we couldn't get our garage door open because the wind was blocking, because our door goes up like this, I said, oh my God, we're up in the hills here. And we got to walk out? I can't walk. I'm 77 years old, man. I can't walk up these hills. It's like Mount Everest here. It's like, pretty steep. So, it's just, I posted this on X, but Sarah was on with her 8-year-old niece last night. And she came out. I'm sorry. Just, one day you're swimming in the pool and the next day it's all gone. But she came out with her little Yeti piggy bank for us to rebuild our house.
Oh. That is so sweet.
Joel Pollak joins us now. He is, like James Woods, a Pacific Palisades resident by way of Skokie, by way of Johannesburg, if I'm remembering correctly. Joel Pollak is Breitbart News senior editor, author of The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days. Joel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Saw from your posts on X that thankfully your house has largely been spared to this point, correct?
As far as I know, when I was in Palisades on Wednesday afternoon covering the fire, I stopped by my house. I had seen on the maps of California fire authorities that my house and the one next to it were marked on the map as not having been burnt. You can't know whether these maps are accurate because there were many examples that I already knew of personally where the map was showing something wasn't burnt and it was. That's how fast the fire was moving. So I stopped by my house and it was indeed still standing. And my neighbor's house was also standing. So the map was accurate in that respect. But there were fires all around. Most of my neighbors' houses had burned completely to the ground. The house across the street to the east completely burned to the ground. The house across the street to the south completely burned to the ground. The house across the corner completely destroyed, nothing left except a hedge or two, chimney stacks. It looks like a bomb hit the city, and there's just nothing anybody could have done to save the neighborhood once it started burning like that. And it was still burning. I mean, I couldn't go down the street to check on my neighbors' homes because it was so dangerous. 3 houses in, there was a house burning as if it were an inferno, just flames everywhere. And there was nothing to do except to check on my house. The water was out. I don't know exactly why, but it hadn't always been out. And one of the most remarkable things I found was that my garden hose had stretched across my garden. Some neighbor or firefighter had turned on my hose and had evidently hosed down a fire at my fence. The fence, which is made of vinyl, melted, but I could see that the hose had been used to put out the fire. So an anonymous neighbor or firefighter had saved my house, and there were still fires burning on the perimeter. The wind was changing directions. It was still very strong. So I grabbed a bucket, which is the bucket my son uses to store his baseballs. He has an obsession with baseball, and he plays just about every day. Emptied the baseballs out, went to the street. There was water flowing in the gutter. No more water pressure in the pipes, but there was water in the gutter. So I filled my bucket, and I started dousing the flames around the perimeter of my house. I put out a fire in my neighbor's yard that had started because if my neighbor's trees had gone up, my house probably would have gone up. So I started working, and a couple guys drove by in a truck, and they asked if I needed help, and they jumped out of the truck, and I found a couple more buckets, and the 3 of us formed an assembly line just putting out fires for about half an hour, and then the wind kicked up, and there was a big pall of black smoke coming toward us, and we said, okay, we got to get out of here. So we left. I don't know if the house survived. That was yesterday afternoon. It's now 5:18 in the morning. The wind did settle down last night, so hopefully the house will still be there. But it will be a house surrounded largely by a destroyed neighborhood.
What about your children's schools or your synagogue and churches?
The schools are closed. The school itself next to my house, the public school, was burnt. I don't know how badly burnt it was. I couldn't get close enough. It was too dangerous to go there. But that school will not open for years. So our children will have to go to school in another community. They're probably going to do school online. It's a return to Zoom school, unfortunately, for the time being, as far as one of my children is concerned. There's a preschool that my 3-year-old attends that remains open, and that's in Santa Monica. That's where we have evacuated to. So she's able to go to school every day. My eldest is 12. She goes to a middle school that is outside of the evacuation area, but that's also closed because people from the school community are evacuated or are fighting fires or dealing with the aftermath of fire. One of my daughter's friends in the high school band lives about half a mile away from us, and I was able to check on that neighborhood yesterday, and his family's house is completely destroyed. Unfortunately, there's just nothing left. In that neighborhood, almost every single house was destroyed. There were 1 or 2 houses that remained, and I checked on another house which miraculously was intact, but there was a fire in the front yard, so we had some water bottles with us, and we extinguished the fire in the front yard, but there's nothing left in that neighborhood. Churches and synagogues, it's a complicated story. We have 2 synagogues in Palisades. The one I go to survived, but it was damaged, at least in terms of the perimeter of the synagogue grounds. So the parking lot was damaged and the children's playground outside was damaged. But the main building of the synagogue is intact. The other synagogue, which is further up the hill, wasn't touched at all. Nothing happened to the building, but the rabbi of that synagogue lost his home. So it's a complicated story. Churches, there's one church that's completely intact near the synagogue. There's a church and a synagogue next to each other. Across the street, the other church has burned completely to the ground. I actually posted on X this morning, my account is Joel Pollak, just my first name, my last name. That's the Presbyterian church, burned completely to the ground, but the cross remains. So I think that's the spirit in which people are absorbing all of this loss, is that there's still faith in rebuilding, faith in the community.
Is the evacuation footprint still expanding, or have there been enough resources brought to bear at this point to essentially hold the line?
The answer to that question depends where you are. Yesterday here in Santa Monica, they expanded the evacuation zone close to where we had actually evacuated to, and then they pulled back and they canceled the evacuation for part of that area. So they're focusing now on certain areas, at least in Santa Monica, which is near the Palisades fire. In other parts of Los Angeles, they had to evacuate the evacuation, they had to expand the evacuation zones in various parts of Hollywood, Studio City, and that's very concerning because you're talking about the most densely populated part of Los Angeles, and it's very difficult to move through that area on a normal day. Now you're asking hundreds of thousands of people to move at once. Very, very difficult. I do think that they'll manage to protect those areas, mostly because the wind has died down, so it's not picking up the fire quite as easily, and also because I think it is easier for fire trucks to move through streets than it is up hillsides. So I'm hopeful that they'll start to get a handle on the fire in the next 24 hours. But, I was thinking of Chicago a lot because we grew up knowing the stories of the Great Chicago Fire and what happened to rebuild the city and how the city came back and so forth. And this is really a fire on that scale. This is like the Great Chicago Fire. There are going to be entire areas of Los Angeles that are completely destroyed. And look, in the late 19th century, it took Chicago about 2 decades to rebuild, and it rebuilt in an incredible way. Much of what we recognize as Chicago and the beauty of Chicago comes from that rebuilding effort. But it is not clear that California is equipped to rebuild because we are run so poorly. Our mayor was in Ghana when this was happening. Mm-hmm. The governor literally threw up his hands. If you don't have that clip, you should play it. It's amazing. The governor threw up his hands and said local people are going to have to figure out how to get water.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's
a local problem. That's what he said.
I don't want to politicize this more than it needs to be. But the last election was in 2022, and the mayor ran on the platform that she was the pro-choice Democrat in the race. She ran on abortion. The other guy, Rick Caruso, who's a private property developer, ran on the idea that he was a businessman who knew how to get things done. Well, here in Palisades, or there in Palisades, since I'm not there at the moment, but in Palisades yesterday where I was, Rick Caruso, the former Republican businessman who allegedly was not pro-choice enough, was able to save his mall. The Palisades Mall, the Village Mall, is completely intact because he had his employees protect the mall. They had fire suppression. They worked to save what they were in charge of. And everything around the mall, everything that the mayor of the city was in charge of, everything that Karen Bass was in charge of, has burnt down. And that tells you about the choice that was given to voters in 2022. Ironically, Palisades voted overwhelmingly for Rick Caruso 2 years ago. So when people say things like, well, California voted for this, The part of California that was destroyed, at least initially, now unfortunately that destruction is spreading, but part of the city of LA that was destroyed first and worst voted for the opposition, voted for better management, didn't get it from the person who won the election. So there needs to be a sea change in governance in Los Angeles and California.
And in every big city in America, basically. But that juxtaposition of Caruso's Mall versus the rest of the city is really illustrative. Joel Pollak, Breitbart News senior editor-at-large, author of The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days. Joel, thanks so much for joining us and giving us the on the ground, and obviously best of luck with your situation, your home, your kids' schooling, and all that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Wow. Are you buying?